During the time I was bullied regularly and cried out to her for help. She just brushed it off and ignored me. So, I handled it myself by using force, punching the bully directly in the eye. Since then, he left me alone. Violence is never the solution, they said. Go to a teacher, they said. I had a teacher who repeated a lecture he'd already given, word for word. He asked a question, and I gave the correct answer. When he asked how I knew, I replied, I wrote it down the last time you gave this lecture. Not my teacher, but my daughter's. In science class, they discussed the case of a Skittle dropped into water. Pointing at the red cloud forming from the candy, he asked the class what was happening to the coating in that scenario. A student answered, it's dissolving. He disagreed, saying, no, it's just disappearing. My 8th grade social studies teacher thought Panama was part of Canada. Why? Because in the geography textbook we were using, both Panama and Canada were shaded with the same pink color. She believed dolphins were fish. No matter how much I argued with her as a 3rd grader, she wouldn't change her mind. They live in the ocean, they're fish. I had a teacher who claimed alligators never attack humans because they are vegetarians. My science teacher said water in a kettle boils at 60 degrees Celsius. Boils! World War II began when Hawaii bombed California, said my 9th grade English teacher. I recall when my 4th grade teacher tried teaching us what defines an animal. One of her criteria was that all animals have brains. I asked, what about jellyfish? They don't have brains. Her reply was, well, then they aren't alive, are they? During a basic anatomy lesson, my teacher asked, can anyone tell me what this is? I, whose family loved the show house, answered, the trachea? She corrected me, saying, no, this is called the windpipe. When she labeled my first C++ project as amateur code. Well, no kidding, it was my first program, haha. My algebra teacher had us subtract 10% from a number to find 90%. To reverse it, she said we should take 10% of the 90% and add it back. That's not how math works. I called her out on it, and she told me I was wrong in front of the class. Afterward, she admitted I was right, but didn't want to confuse the others. Lady, messing up basic math was what confused them. My high school biology teacher asked me a question about something she was discussing, the answer of which was projected on the whiteboard. I looked at the board, and she covered the answer with her left hand to hide it. I pointed out that the text was still visible under her hand. She seemed upset, so she placed her right hand on top of the left one. I burst out laughing, and she kicked me out and called my parents. He used to brag about how many people failed his class. My geography teacher once linked self-checkouts to the mark of the beast and the apocalypse. I can't recall all the details. In 2nd grade, our teacher had us name the hottest things we could think of. After others said sun and fire, I mentioned lava, which the teacher claimed wasn't real. Then she had the entire class laugh at me. It made me feel incredibly stupid for years until I realized lava is real, and that teacher was a jerk. My English teacher asked when Woodrow Wilson served as president. We were reading The Scarlet Ibis, and since he was mentioned, I raised my hand and said his election years, 1912 and 1916, if I recall correctly. She told me I was wrong. I thought I had gotten the years wrong, but then another student answered, the 1900s, and she agreed. I was about 5 or 6 and drawing pink trees, which were supposed to be magnolias. I knew them from the annual blossom viewing my family did each year, and our neighbors had one in their garden. My teacher glanced at my drawing and said, there's no such thing as pink trees. I tried explaining there were, and even my neighbors had one. She interrupted and told me I was lying. I'm still mad about that. The teacher asked what the most spoken language in the world is. I said Mandarin, and he corrected me by saying, that's an orange, and insisted the correct answer was Spanish. I had a high school English teacher who loved poetry. One afternoon, she got into a heated argument with half the class over a poem because she read the word noon, meaning no one, as noon, and refused to accept it could mean no one, even though it was the only interpretation that made sense. In 2nd grade, when she misspelled February as February on the board, I went up to her desk to point it out. She explained how I was wrong, and she was right. That was the moment I started realizing how many people are just plain wrong. When my English teacher, I'm from Italy, so English is my second language, said lettuce instead of lettuce. She was one of the worst teachers, and eventually, she got replaced. My wife and I attended a birthing prep class. Both of us work in healthcare but didn't mention it to the teacher. She strongly advised parents not to vaccinate their newborns against hepatitis B. believing it was only contracted through contaminated food, and couldn't understand why a baby would need such a vaccine. It's one thing to be wrong, but advising a room full of first-time parents based on your ignorance is dangerous. I had a substitute teacher tell me to stop reading and pay attention, while the rest of the class was misbehaving, jumping on chairs, throwing things, and talking over her. But apparently, I was the problem for quietly reading my book while waiting for her to regain control of the class. After a substitute chemistry teacher heated a test tube over a Bunsen burner, he carelessly handed the hot test tube to a student standing closest to him. The boy, trusting that it was fine, burned his hand badly, and the glass test tube shattered on the floor. She started showing the trade routes of medieval Europe on a map of South America. I had a teacher argue with me that sate wasn't a word. I had to pull out a dictionary to prove her wrong. Later, I had to do the same with die being the singular of dice. She gave me an F for plagiarism, even though I didn't steal anything and refused to show me her evidence. This was high school, and I wrote at a university level, as she put it. She claimed she didn't need to show proof when I requested it. My high school geography teacher insisted Antarctica was a country. I lost points on my test because of it.